What's going on, everyone? Today we're here with Rashida Strober. She is the world's first dark-skinned activist. I've never heard of that before, but I've definitely viewed her channel, and she is very passionate about dark-skinned activism. So, Rashida Strober, thank you for joining us on the show.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Now, Rashida, could you please explain to us what is dark-skinned activism?
Dark-skinned activism is a concept that I gave birth to in 1998 because I myself am obsessed with dark skin, and the obsession came as a result of me going through what I call dark skin mental abuse, going through that as a child. And what that just basically means is I underwent a lot of dark skin discrimination in my family and in the larger society. So as a result, I started looking for people at this time, like in the late 90s, who were talking about specifically about dark skin. And I joined different Black empowerment political movements, and was subconsciously looking for these people to talk about it. I looked to popular musicians to speak about it, and no one was talking about it. No one was, but it was always like the big elephant in the room that no one would talk about, and that I was constantly experiencing myself. And so one day I got the opportunity, when I was an undergraduate student at St. Petersburg College, I got the opportunity during African American History Month. There was a oratorical contest going on, a speech contest, lecture, whatever you want to call it. There was a prize associated with it. It was between $200 to $250. And I had a background in oratory and in the performing arts. So I said, you know what, here's my opportunity. I'm going to speak about it, because a couple of weeks prior to that, I had saw a magazine with Alec Weck on the cover. I don't know if y'all know who that is, but this was like in 1997. She was on the 97 cover of the Cosmopolitan magazine. I still have the cover. I saw her on the cover and I was like, wow, I could not believe it, because she was like super dark skinned, and she had on all white. And I was like, wow, I couldn't believe that this dark-skinned woman was on the cover of this mainstream magazine. And so I bought the magazine. I was a poor college student, but I didn't care. I bought that magazine, spent my last money on it. I still have it to this day. So I was like, I'm gonna talk about this, because what I noticed at the time, and we didn't have the search engines. They weren't up to par in 98 like they are now, like with Google and all this kind of stuff. But I remember when I was at St. Pete College doing my research, I ran into some things online and some other places where Black people were saying all this negative stuff about Alec Weck, that she was ugly, that she was manly looking, and she was not the definition of Black female beauty. And I remember thinking to myself, oh my God, these are some of the same things that I have been experiencing, being called ugly. Everything associated with ugly was always associated with my darkness. It was always, the black and ugly jokes, the monkey mouth, all these different things associated with darkness. And I saw this affinity, and I was like, no one is talking about this. And it was so frustrating to me. So I'm writing a book right now called Inventing Dark-Skinned Activism. And I speak about this in the book, that I was looking for a dark-skinned savior, if you will. And there was no one there. So I decided I'm going to talk about this. I'm going to speak on this, and I don't care if people disagree with me. I'm going to voice my opinion on this. So I started devising the speech, and I still have a couple of the manila cue cards that it was written on at the time. And I just started writing, and I had a beautiful dark-skinned 7th grade teacher who she got me into public speaking, and she would always tell me, practice, practice, practice. So I was up all night just writing and practicing and just preparing to give this speech. And I gave the speech, and I remember there was a dark-skinned Indian young lady who was also a part of the contest. And lo and behold, I gave the speech and I won. And my aunt was there, and my son, he was born in 98. And I believe he was somewhere around like maybe 6 months or something like that. And I won, and I was so happy. We went to go pick up the check from the bookstore, and I took my aunt out to eat. And it was just completely awesome. But what I didn't like is I got a lot of negative feedback I would never forget from, and I have to say this because I have to speak the truth, y'all, from the Black men in the audience. they were just giving me like nasty looks and like, what is she talking about? And it was like, oh my, but I had to finally speak about this in terms of what I was experiencing as a dark-skinned woman my entire life. And then to see it happen to other dark-skinned people and then to not see anyone speaking up on it, I had to talk about it. And that was the birth of dark-skinned activism back in 1998.
All right, you had said something about the black men. I'm gonna touch on that, but I want to go back to something you said about your childhood. What is the earliest thing you remember someone saying to you that made you realize you are dark skinned and something is wrong?
It was actually, and you know, I hate to say this, I really do, because I kind of feel bad about speaking about my family members, but my siblings. I'm the only girl in a bunch of 5 boys, and I have this one brother, I'm not gonna say his name, but he did make disparaging comments about how I looked, you know, in terms of my dark skin and the beauty that I did not possess as a result. You know, so I heard things like, you gotta get pretty, or you need to make sure you know, my mom used to straighten my hair when I was a kid. So you need to make sure that you get your hair straight because that'll help you look better. Or they didn't want to be necessarily seen with me because I wasn't good looking enough. And yes, I know this might sound outrageous to some, but it could be the experience of others as well. This was going on in my own family circle. And then it was in the church. It was in schools. The earliest memory was in the 5th grade. There was this very popular black boy, and there was a young lady that was, I believe she was mixed race. And he would basically let us know, all the dark girls, and I was the darkest one in the class, that I don't want you. She's the prettiest one. He would let us know this in all types of ways. And I saw this and I started to, you know, feel this and internalize the fact that I was not pretty enough. And somehow it had something to do, it was always associated with the skin tone. It was always, if a negative comment was made towards me, it was always black and ugly thrown in there. Crusty, that was another word I heard used a lot. Crispy, spot, monkey mouth. So these were things that I heard at home, and these were things that I heard at school.
So you felt really rejected?
Oh, absolutely.
So you mentioned your mother. You say she didn't want to be seen with you. What was your father?
Well, I was speaking about my brother. Well, one brother who had this.
Mm-hmm.
It was one of my brothers, but my father, interestingly enough, he was the opposite of what I was experiencing in terms of dark skin mental abuse. He was a Muslim, in the Nation of Islam. Mm-hmm. And he used to always tell me how beautiful and black I was. And he would tell me this over and over again. And I didn't live with him because my mom and dad, they split when I was around like 3 years old. So I lived with my mom, but occasionally I would get a chance to visit my father. And he was very dark skinned. And he would always tell me how beautiful I was. And now I understand rather why he told me that. Because he knew that me being a dark-skinned young lady, he knew what it is that I was going to face. So I actually did have a very good father who did try to instill within me that I was beautiful. But unfortunately, I wasn't around him enough because when I was conceived, my mom was 23 and my dad was 53. So he was, you know, the age difference obviously was there, and then they split. So.
Colorism. I know it's a big issue within our community. Now, in your dark skin activism, do you talk about the history of colorism, where it originally comes from?
Right, and let me just preface the answer to that question with saying that I don't deal with colorism. What I've done is created a brand new paradigm, and I've gotten a lot of resistance because that's what happens when a paradigm shifts. Colorism is nothing new. Colorism has been around for the longest. there's actually the colorism scholarly literature. When you talk about the history, there's extensive research that has been conducted by one of the chief colorism scholars is a woman named Dr. Margaret Hunter. And I have read her work, and she's actually light-skinned. I've read her work. I respect her work because what she's done is she's researched colorism on a global scale. Mm-hmm. So she talks about colorism in the African American community, in the Mexican American community, and different communities of color. So and if you do the research, you will find out that there is a vast amount of colorism scholarly literature, which I'm one of those people. I have read most of the colorism scholarly literature. So the problem that I saw in talking about colorism, and what I've always wanted to focus on, which people kept trying to deter me from focusing on, is the issue specifically of dark skin discrimination. And so what I did, I call it, I left the colorism part alone, and I call it darkism. Darkism. Darkism is a book that I actually wrote. It's called Darkism, 25 Ways Dark-Skinned People Are Discriminated Against. And darkism talks about the history of darkism is something that it's a new development. So it's something that is going to be studied in academics. You know, it's going to be studied later on down the line. It actually is being studied right now. So when we go back and we look at the history of dark skin discrimination, we don't see people focusing and honing in on dark skin discrimination. So you talk about the history. There's a man named Wallace Thurman, and Wallace Thurman was way before his time. Like, he wrote a book called The Blacker the Berry. And I know people have heard that term, that phrase over and over, the blacker the berry. They've heard people like Tupac mention it. But I want people to know we're talking about the history of dark skin discrimination. Read The Blacker the Berry. This book was written in 1929. 1929. And the book, the protagonist in the book, her name is Emma Lou. And this is in 1929. This woman, when I read this book, I was like, I just was like, I couldn't believe it. This woman's life revolved around dark skin discrimination, or what I call darkism. From her family, she experienced it. In the book, her mom, and I'm paraphrasing what her mom said. She said something to the effect that Emma Lou's crime was being born dark skinned and female. It's in the book. Go read the book. And when I read that, I was like, I had to just like sit for a moment and just like take that in. You see, Emma Lou, she experienced darkism through employment, through education. She was shunned by her own Black sisters because she was too dark. She experienced it in dating. She experienced it when she moved to New York City. Please read that book, because I'm telling you right now, in my mind, when we talk about the history of darkism, we got to go back and pay homage to Wallace Thurman, because this man was way ahead of his time. When I talk about him, it's like, oh my God, I get emotional because he was so ahead of his time. His whole book was about darkism. And then you move up and you talk about people like, and I have to say her name, I gotta give, because I'm from the academic world, folks. I have just to give you a framework of how I work. I have a master's degree in political science. And as an educated person, you research the researchers and then research the researchers again. So you pay homage to those that came before you. So Cola Booth is another person. She's actually the first person to ever speak exclusively on dark-skinned female beauty discrimination. And let me tell you, I've been studying this since 1998. I have looked for all the information that you could ever think about on dark skin discrimination to see who's speaking on this. And Cola Booth, and of course, going back to Wallace Thurman the Great, that's what he is. Those two people, they have laid down the foundation in terms of a framework to discuss what I now call darkism. I hope I answered your question.
Well, you know, that's reframe it a different way. What I was trying to get at is, yes, everything you're talking about isn't a legitimate issue. It is. I can't separate that. I've been called names being a dark-skinned black man. Okay, get it. But what I'm saying is, as I, start researching, I start looking at more where the originator who created the conditions for someone to be discriminated against because they're dark or having differences between dark and light. We have to go back all the way back to the transatlantic slave trade and when we got here, because we didn't have no dark discrimination or light this. Slave master created the division on the plantation with our people, having the dark people out in the field and his children that he made mulattoes, or he raped black women inside the plantation household. Started the division. And you have to think also, Rashida, when you're talking about the black men as well, you have to understand we have been conditioned to hate black, period. Dark, shoot, you could be light skinned and people still hate you too, at the end of the day. So what I'm saying is, in the midst of the darkism, which is a legitimate issue, what you're talking about, what I'm saying is, how can we fix the whole issue of colorism within our community? Because we shouldn't be hating each other based on skin tone when we all, at the end of the day, it's the same.
Right. I totally agree with what you're saying. In terms of the historical foundation of darkism, it comes out of slavery. It comes out of European expansion and imperialism and greed and capitalism that happened as a result in America. And that's where darkism comes out of. You are absolutely right. When we talk about what is the solution to the problem of darkism, dark-skin activism is about equality. And one of the things that comes out of darkism, and this is really what I'm about. This is really at the heart of dark-skin activism, as well as bringing the black man back to the dark-skinned woman. I have to say that in balanced numbers. That's a goal as well. But one of the chief goals is economics, economic equality. Because see, when a person is dark-skinned, and this is, of course, has been proven over and over in the research, when a person is dark-skinned, their life chances in terms of economic, social, and political equality, it can be limited. You have to fight a little bit, you gotta work a little bit harder. And so the area where darkism, it really, really hits home to me is in economics. And so in my book, I talk about this concept, or this word that I coined. It's called systemic economic darkism. And what that basically means is you are discriminated against because you're dark and subsequently shut out of different economic opportunities. So for example, in the modeling industry, that's the first example that just came to my mind. A lot of dark-skinned models, some of them have came to me and told me this. They have not been able to get jobs because of dark-skin discrimination, darkism. So that means if they can't get the job, then that directly impacts their economic development. I myself, I remember when I was trying to get into the University of South Florida as a graduate student, I experienced darkism. I had all the qualifications that they provided on paper that you're supposed to have. Yet when I applied for the program, I was turned down. And then when I started to investigate, I could clearly see that there was instances of darkism taking place. Other examples in everyday life, when you're trying to get things done, I've experienced this going into banks, for example, or going to just basic customer service. When you're trying to handle your business, I've experienced darkism, where people treat you differently, or they might not give you the same advice, or they might not give you the same information, and darkism has something to do with it. I've seen people on jobs. I worked as a recruiter in hiring. I've seen darkism firsthand and fought against it, actively fought against it. I've seen dark-skinned people discriminated against. I'm talking about dark-skinned people who had more qualifications than a non-dark skinned person. I've seen the non-dark skinned person rise above or get the job above the dark skin. I've seen these things with my own eyes. And so what I realized is that darkism drastically impacts economics, a person's personal economic development. Yes, being dark skinned can impact your economic development. And so what am I calling for? I'm calling for equality. Darkism is about human rights, as far as I'm concerned. It's a human rights issue, because as far as I'm concerned, every single human being born on this earth, and I don't care what color you are, I feel like every human being has a right to share in the resources equally. I just don't understand this whole, well, I understand it, but it's still mind-boggling when you really start to think about how this economic system works. And then the system of economic privilege based on a person's skin tone. So, you know, we've got to create a more equal world where people are not discriminated against based on their dark skin, where people have the same advantages in education, in the entertainment industry, you know, in whatever field of life that they choose to go into. They should not be discriminated against because they're too dark. Well, and this is anywhere in the world. This is not, this doesn't just take place in the United States. They have, I believe they're called the untouchables in India. You know, the caste system that they had over there, to where the darker people are treated the worse. It's all about economics, economic development. And you look at Haiti, for example. I've always been very upset when the dark skin, and I have to say it, the dark skinned Haitians, it's been so many cases where they've been turned around and lighter skinned Cubans have been let in. Or if you look at the criminal justice system, there was a study done by the Villanova University, where they proved that darker skinned women get longer prison sentences than their non-dark skinned peers. Or if you look at the situation in the schools, where there was a New York Times study that proved that, which this is something that I already knew working in the school system, that dark skinned girls get more punishment than non-dark skinned girls. So the evidence is there. So what we have to do is we have to create equality. We have to, I love, I'm not sure if you're familiar with Dr. Neely Fuller, but I respect his work. And he talks about the concept of replacing an unjust system with a system of justice. And I love that. I absolutely love that, because that is exactly, that's the answer. That's what we have to do. We have to create a situation where there's equality.
Well, Rashida, you said a whole lot of things that I need to take time to go through. You was talking about the bank. You was talking about just different instances with your school. What was the reason in the school they gave you that why you was rejected?
Well, the reason was based on me. They claimed that I didn't meet the qualifications. But again, I pay attention to detail.
Okay,
when
so
I looked at the qualifications, I did meet the qualifications. And so I had to go in and say, look, these are the qualifications. I have these qualifications. I should be led in this program. And subsequently, when they went back and looked and saw that I met the qualifications, after I had to go in myself and personally, you know, make my case, I was led into the program.
Okay, so once you made your case and you was led into the program, why did you equate the rejection being to dark skinned? Because if you was truly dark skinned, even with your research, they'd be like, no, you're still not getting here because I want them dark skinned people in here.
Right. Well, the reason I equated darkism, and this is one of the things that I want to say, that's a fair question. One thing about darkism and racism is very hard to prove. It's very hard to prove because it's so subliminal, and you might know that you're going through this, but it's like, how do you show evidence and how do you show proof? And that's the reason why a lot of civil rights discrimination cases, you know, they lose in court, even though the person they probably were discriminated against, they lose in court. because it's very, very, very difficult to prove. But when I got into the program, I was the only black female in the program, in the graduate program, for probably around 2 years. I was the only black female in that program. And then about 2 years down the line, there was another black woman that was let into the program. She was very, 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 very fair skinned. And when I was in graduate school, I didn't talk much. I was there to work. I knew what I needed to do. I wanted to get my degree, and that's what I was there for. But I listened a lot to what people said. And I would sit and listen to the non-dark skinned women, and they would talk about the ease at which they were able to enter the program. They would talk about the ease at which they were able to obtain a major advisor, which that is a very, your inability to obtain a major advisor can get you thrown out of any graduate program, because you have to get someone to be on your advisement team in order for you to obtain your degree. And I had a very hard time with that as well. But these women would talk freely, very freely, about the ease at which they were able to get into the program and all the benefits that they were able to obtain. And I never said anything. I just sat and listened.
Okay.
And again,
okay. Now, I believe that some things you're dealing with, at least from what I'm hearing, maybe it could have been some racism. And when a person has some racism, they don't care your dark light, they don't like you. If you ain't them, let's clear something up. When you say non-dark people, what is the people group you're speaking on? You speaking on white folks? Who you speaking on when you say that? Not the other. Yeah, who you talking about?
A non-dark skinned person can be any race or any color. A non-dark skinned person can be a white person. It can be a Mexican person, a Puerto Rican person, any person that's basically not dark skinned.
Okay, but just so we could frame for the people listening in their mindset, what racial background was the people in the original who you were fighting against to get into the program? Were they white? What were they?
They were all white.
Okay, all right. So it's safe to say you probably were dealing with some racism, correct?
Racism and darkism, but yes.
With racism, they don't give you dark light. Okay, now, what if you change some racist person's mind? I've even heard this happen. They say, I used to think black people were a certain way until I met you. And have you noticed that maybe you was the one that opened up the door for those other black girls to come in?
Absolutely, and that's what innovators have to do. That's what the civil rights movement was all about. That's what people like Harriet Tubman and Nat Turner, those people, even John Brown, they opened up the door. Some of them had to kick the door down, but they opened up the door and made it better for other people that came after them. And I'm glad you asked that question, because I stormed into the office of the political science department, the graduate studies department. I remember storming. I was so upset. I could not believe that these people would not let me into this program after I worked so hard to prove myself and I met all the qualifications. And I stormed in there, and I remember there was a short, very nice, kind, dark-skinned woman, and she just walked up to me. I'm raging like this, and she walks up to me like this. And it immediately calmed me down, and she just talked to me in a very still, quiet voice, and she told me, okay, this is what you need to do, and I'm, moved from there, because she saw what was going on, and she said, you know what, something in her heart made her want to reach out and help me. So she helped pave the way for me to understand what I needed to do to get into that program. And then what I went through, of course, paved the way, I'm pretty sure, for others to be led into the program. So absolutely.
Okay. So let's talk about, so we established there probably was some racism, not that just you were dark, but dark is part of racism. Fine. Okay. Let's talk about the bank. You say that you went to the bank and you felt you was being discriminated against based on you being dark skinned. What did they tell you?
standing in line, again, I'm a very observant person.
Okay.
When you stand in line and you watch people that are non-dark, and I've seen this, that are non-dark, get a, hello, how you doing? How's your day going? Hi, oh, that's awesome. And then when I, as a dark-skinned person, walk up with, hello, no attitude, no, you know, no, nothing mean, or I'm not having my face balled up or anything like that.
Okay.
I get silence, and the person halfway wanting to deal with me and not really wanting this. And by the way, darkism can be inflicted by any person, not just, this isn't just with white people, it's with black people as well. So I've experienced this form of darkism at a I wouldn't say it's a black bank, but at a bank where mostly black people worked. So I mean, it goes both ways. So yes, you know, the customer service and the way that I was treated as a dark-skinned person, as opposed to the way that I saw non-dark-skinned people treated.
Okay, once again, we have to paint this picture for the audience. Did you see any black people that was lighter than you going in, and they was like, "Hey, how you doing? And you having a great day?" And they saw you like, "Oh hell." I mean, did that happen or what?
Well, that actually did happen, but it wasn't at the bank. This was actually at a pack and ship store. That exact same scenario happened.
And what did you do?
I just stood there.
Why?
I was watching there.
Why?
I just watched there because I was just observing, just to see if what I was experiencing, you know, if I was really experiencing what I thought I was experiencing. So let me explain to you what happened.
Okay.
So one day I walked into a pack and ship that was owned by two darker skinned Indians. I walked in the store, there was somebody already in line ahead of me that they was taking care of. So I stood there and waited in line. A few minutes later, a light-skinned black woman walked in, and immediately both dark-skinned people, "Hi, how are you? How you doing?" They let her walk right in front of me. They ignored me, didn't say one word, and I didn't say anything. I just stood there and watched. And then she just walked right on in front of me, and they started taking care of her, you know, helping her with whatever she needed. And then so I just stood there for a while, just to take in if this was really happening, or am I going crazy here? But I realized, yes, this was happening. I'm standing here in line. I know these people saw me because I'm pretty tall. I'm 5'10", I'm dark skinned. I mean, you can't miss me. And so finally I said, "Excuse me," but I was next. And they looked at me, the light-skinned black woman looked at me, and she's like, "Oh, I'm sorry. And then the Indians, they kind of looked at me like, they had this look on their face of kind of like shock. So as they was saying all this, I just politely walked out. And then what I did later on, I wrote them a letter, and I pretty much told them about their darkism. I let them know in a nice way, hey, this is what you're doing, and this is what you need to do to correct it. So yes, it has happened with a light-skinned black person being given better customer service versus a dark-skinned black person like me. Yes.
Well, like I said, I know some people. You said it was Indians though, like Indians. That's what you're talking about. Yes. Yeah, we also know, like you alluded to earlier, about their racial caste system. So that kind of go in line with their caste system. If basically, you know, what you're saying about the lighter is appreciated a lot more within their own country, right?
Right.
Oh, okay. So you talked about the Haitians and the Cubans. That's 100% racism because they let the white Cubans in. They don't let the black Cubans in because they got dark-skinned black Cubans over there as well.
Right.
You know, so that's 100% correct. But what I'm saying is that, listen, I'm asking you and I'm pinpointing certain things you're saying because some things you're saying I feel is just racism, and then some things is what someone want to call maybe a color struck or whatever. So let's get to the black men about your speech. You told me about they looked at you ugly, or did you just see you say they said anything disparaging toward you?
Well, they would, you know, how people mumble under their breath. They look at you like they talking, they mumbling, and that's pretty much what they were doing. I just happened to just notice people as I was walking around in the crowd after the speech contest was over, and I could hear little mumbling and the funny looks. You know when people don't agree with you and when they're treating you a certain kind of way, you know it, you feel it, it's there. So.
Okay. So do you feel images are powerful?
Absolutely.
Do you believe there's a anti-black propaganda out there in the media in all forms?
Absolutely.
Okay. Now I say this for a reason. I'm saying that because ever since we are children, you and me, who was always put in our face as the standard of beauty?
Of course, the majority population, and that would be people of European descent.
Okay. So we are inundated day in and day out, seeing a white woman in our face or a white man. You turn on any channel, you don't see dark-skinned people like me or dark-skinned people like you on the commercials constantly, unless you go to BET, which was the only black channel they had back at least when I was a child. I mean, I don't know your age range, but it was just BET. So all the time when you go to school, the majority of your teachers were what?
White.
And probably white women, right?
Right.
Okay. So you have the image of beauty as the white woman presented to this little black boy constantly in the system of white supremacy. You have a white teacher in his face the majority of the hours of the day, more so than his mother. And then we have a colorism issue that comes all the way back from slavery. And yes, you're right, Rashida. We perpetuate colorism every day. We are I admit, we can be the most horrible people to our own people with colorism. But we have to understand at the end of the day, a lot of us hate ourselves. Right. So what do you suggest that we do to love ourselves? Once we love ourselves, it won't be no such thing as darkism anymore.
Right. Absolutely. That's a great question. What we have to do is start with education. And then what we have to do, I'm not satisfied because I've heard people talk about educating ourselves as black people as a solution to our problem. I've heard that a lot. But what we have to do is actually put the education that we've learned in terms of self-knowledge, in terms of where we came, our history as African people, we have to actually put it in practice. So that means after you get the education, then you practice the education in some way to impact yourself and other people around you. So for example, with the dark skin activism, what I'm doing is I'm practicing, I'm living every day the education that I have learned in terms of knowledge of self. For me, that means I don't perm my hair. That's one of the things that I won't do. For me, that also means I will never bleach my skin. I love my dark skin, and I take care of myself. I take care of my temple. I'm not gonna put drugs or alcohol or any of that type of foolishness in my body. For me, that means my daughter. I have a 4-year-old little dark-skinned daughter. I will never put a perm in her hair. I will never put weave in her hair. She has her hair in a natural style called sister locks. I teach her about her African history, about where she came from. I teach her why it's important for her to wear her hair natural. I teach her every day that she's beautiful, that her dark skin is beautiful. I also speak to other young children, kids in school, in kindergarten through 12th grade, about this whole issue of darkism. If I see, for example, a black child disparaging dark skin, I don't sit there and just listen to it. I deal with it. I sit them down and I talk to them and I explain to them why this is wrong. And I explain to them their history as a person of African descent. So we have to do things like that. We have to educate ourselves and then live that education and impart that education, especially on young people, because they're young, they're impressionable, they're gonna learn something, like you said earlier, about the media pushing their images on us. So that's another solution to the problem. We can create our own media images. You know, BET, for example. BET should have more darker skinned people, darker skinned women and men in prominent positions. So there's a lot of different things that we could do. Also, when we look at, for example, dark skinned children, I go back to the study, the New York Times study of dark skinned girls being given harsher punishment than non-dark skinned girls. I worked in the school system. When I saw dark-skinned children being mistreated, I stopped it. I stepped in. I didn't have to come in there and say, oh, that dark-skinned child is being mistreated. But when I saw this stuff, I didn't just sit back and just say, okay, I'm going to let this. No, you can step up and you can do something about it. You can stop things from, you can make fair situations. So there's, I mean, it's so many different things that we could do on a small level that turns into huge gains. That later on in life, that same child might say, okay, I know I'm somebody because somebody cared about me and they stepped up to the plate to make sure that I was treated fairly.
Now, let me ask you about little dark-skinned boys. Do you believe they suffer darkism?
Oh, going back to, and I base a lot of what I say based off of my own personal experience of what I saw. When I was a substitute teacher, I saw this with my own eyes, this little very dark-skinned third grade boy. He walked into the class and he was in there for probably no more than 3 minutes. I was reading over the lesson plans. All of a sudden I look up and he's kicking over desks. I mean, tearing the place up. So of course, immediately I go over to figure out what's going on. And he tells me that a black girl called him black. Mm-hmm. And that was the reason for all the ruckus. There was a teacher that was in there at the time. She was non-dark skinned, non-black, non-dark skinned. She did not understand it. And that's the part where I'm saying this little boy could have been suspended from school and gotten in trouble. No, that's not the proper course of action to take. He was a victim of darkism. So I had to pretty much school her on what was really going on here and why it was going on, because that's what a lot of non-dark skinned people, non-black people, they don't understand the dynamics of darkism. And so sometimes they react in such ways with suspending the child or putting the child in timeout. This boy did not deserve that. He was a victim of darkism. And unfortunately, it was by a black girl. And so at that moment, I sat down. I sat the whole class down after making sure everybody was safe. And we had a long discussion on what basically darkism is, on discussing the children's African history. We went into problem solving mode.
So you went through the route of education.
Absolutely. And that's what you have to do with young kids like that, because I needed to somehow make this third grade, very dark skinned little boy understand that there's nothing wrong with him being black. You are black, but there's nothing wrong with it. But darkism has made it a situation where even children as young as, and even, oh my God, even my own daughter has experienced it. Children as young as pre-kindergarten, they are already predisposed to believe that dark skin is inferior. So as soon as we see it, we have to deal with it and address it head on. So yes, dark skinned boys are victims of darkism. I've seen it with my own eyes, and I have stepped in many a times to stop it and to do something about it.
Now earlier you had said that you were trying to work to bring the black man back to the dark-skinned black woman. You said earlier, correct?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. So let's go back to that little boy you was talking about that had an experience or maybe a few experiences like that from little black girls, possibly. Now, he could develop a self-hate issue, right?
Absolutely.
Okay, so since he's developed this self-hate issue, not because he just woke up one day and say, hey, I hate being dark. It's because he heard all these disparaging words. Then we talked about earlier the anti-black propaganda, the images, and then even now the propaganda of showing a black man with a white woman constantly. They won't show two black people together. They won't even show a black person, let's say with a Hispanic or Asian or Arab or whatever else, but they want to show interracial. It's always a white woman. I don't know if you noticed that.
Right.
And
I have.
Yeah, it's media propaganda. It's anti-black, actually. So if you're going to bring the black man back to the dark-skinned woman, then how are you going to do that fighting those two entities?
Right, that's an excellent question. By doing things like what I did with this class and this little boy, you have to just deal with it head on. You have to be honest and tell the truth. Let these kids know, hey, look, this has came out of self-hate, and the self-hate has came out of a system of slavery and oppression that we as Black people have gone through for years. And what we need to do, instead of hating each other and calling each other names because of our skin tone, we need to embrace it. We need to love ourselves. So it goes back to being honest about what the problem is, being honest with these kids and accepting the fact that, like you said, a lot of these Black men, they develop self-hate because of some Black women who do disparage them because of their dark skin tone. It works both ways. So we have to be honest about it and call it what it is, and then say what we need to do is come back to ourselves. Let's stay together and work out the problem.
Yeah, because some of the brothers that and some, you know, Black women don't understand this, and sometimes I get into these conversations and the women, you know, they don't want to have that discussion because they're getting too much emotion and want to just get upset. But I can tell that some of these guys who are dating different races of women, if you talk to them long enough, you'll find out one or two things. Either they had an issue in the past, or they're having a mother issue where the mom possibly had disparaged them. And then so they just internalize that and just don't want to deal with anything that's Black.
Right.
And sometimes I think instead of attacking the guys, talk to them and find out what got them that way. Like, it's like in the Black community, we don't want to talk to each other and find out why are we certain ways. We just want to pounce. Why is that?
Because it's easier. It's the hard thing to do is to deal with the issue head on, to look our issues, our self-hate in the face honestly and say, how did we get to this point? Because when you start talking about, you talk about being emotional, when you start talking about how we got to the point of self-hate, it's a human thing. You can't avoid the emotion that's in it. So, you know, that's not something that we're going to be able to get rid of. So my thing is, I think we have to deal with it honestly and deal with all the parts that come along with it. Running away is not solving the problem. We have to learn how to work through it, do whatever it takes to work through the problem and accept it. Say out loud, yeah, I was called ugly by a Black woman, or I was cheated on by a Black woman. I've heard Black men have told me this. I don't argue with them. I can't, because that is their experience. I can't disparage their personal experience. That makes no sense. All I can do is say, okay, and accept it and say, okay, how do we move forward now? Can there be some sort of reconciliation?
Yes.
And that's what I'm working towards, reconciliation.
Yes, and you know, we've been doing, you know, different interviews with people from African nations and stuff like that, just exposing, you know, even like I said, the audience and even some of the brothers say, hey, you know, most of the women that we've interviewed has been dark skinned, right? So, you know, you see these brothers making nice comments about, you know, the ladies. So there's brothers that like dark skinned women and probably, you know, you want African women. There's plenty of them out there. And so I think it's an issue, and yes, it's bad, but I think it's not as bad at times. But if you let the media shine a light on it, Rashida, they'll make it worse than what it is.
I beg to differ. Yeah, I beg to differ. I mean, and again, I'm obviously going based off of my own personal experience. But what I will say is there are a lot of Black men that do love dark-skinned women. And in the course of my dark-skinned activism, I have talked to a lot of Black men that love dark-skinned women. So I appreciate them and I respect them. And that's why I don't disparage Black men, because I had a father who was an example. All I ever saw him do was praise Black women constantly. So I have a good view and a good opinion of Black men because I've had that foundation growing up. So.
Well, I definitely get, you know, when you come from your experience, because I can say certain experiences I have, and I've learned with life not to try to say, oh yeah, this is a legitimate. Well, I'm not gonna say legitimate. This is a big issue because it's happened to me constantly. But from what I know about brothers, they just want a nice looking woman, and if she's dark skinned, it doesn't matter. I have not seen a dark skinned sister that look good never have a man. I haven't.
Right. I understand. You know, one of the things that we also have to consider as well is we have to consider the global impact of darkism. So, for example, when we look in terms of the relationship between the black man and the dark-skinned woman. So when we look at, for example, Africa, a lot of African people will tell you that the women, there's a big problem of bleaching in Africa and also in a lot of areas in the Caribbean. They will tell you that the main reason why the women are bleaching is because they want to attract a husband. So, I mean, the thing is, if in fact you have black men worldwide that love dark-skinned women, which we know, I truly believe that they should start making it known more, because I think at the end of the day, because I respect black men so much and I love black men so much, I truly believe that when it comes down to relationships and darkism, I believe that it is the black man that can solve the problem. Like, it's not even me as a black woman, it's the black men. They hold the solution. So you know.
so you say that, and I've heard that before, that, well, you know, black men say they love black women or dark women, then they need to proclaim this a lot more. But I don't really see other groups doing that. Like, say, oh, I love these white women. White men, actually, white men started a movement against they women called Men Going Their Own Way. I mean, so they can't stand white women a lot of the times themselves. So why is it that you feel the black man must make a proper proclamation on a constant daily basis? Do you feel the spirit of black women is that broken where they constantly have to do that?
Absolutely. I mean, well, if you look at the history of white women, and white women don't need to have the same level of praise and therapy, because they've already been placed on a pedestal. I mean, white people they've done a great job of doing that since the days of slavery, since we came over to the country, and you have a diversity of people. You had Africans, Indians, and Europeans. So historically they propelled white women as pure and as beautiful, and they have that status. So they don't have to work to have the status. They're already on top. It is the dark. There's a darkism caste system, if you will. Dark-skinned women are on the bottom. If you look at the hierarchy of women and beauty, white women are already on the top, and then you go down the ladder, you see mixed race people or people with lighter skin. They could be of different ethnicities and whatnot, but if you go down and down and down, when it comes to beauty, dark women are on the bottom, and we always get the spoils last. So there does need to me, I think there does need to be a concerted effort among, and I say this respectfully again because I love black men. I'm not here to bash black men. I love them, so I want their praise. And a lot of black women love black men, and they want the praise and admiration. It's a natural thing of the black man, and so we as dark-skinned women, we need it a little bit more.
Well, from what I've been seeing, and a lot of brothers been telling me, a lot of them have kind of been looking back toward the black woman more and more as they see this racism and white supremacy, and they're seeing that, wait a minute, I can't give her a pass either because she participating in white supremacy with her man too, and not saying that we go through stuff. So I'm seeing a lot of brothers, really looking, as sisters and talking about them. And really, if you look at the numbers, the majority of black people marry each other. I mean, that's just facts. But like I say, it goes back to anti-black propaganda, constantly putting up a black guy with a white woman in your face constantly, using those images all the time. It makes you think it's much bigger than what it is. That's why I like to base things off of, you know, the facts and what they are. But, you know, I feel what you're talking about Africa. Like I said, I just had a Cameroonian sister on the other day. The bleaching is horrible, but they also suffering at the hands of global white supremacy as well. And they deal with self-hate due to white supremacy. Right. So your dark skin activism could probably help a lot of African nations as well. There's plenty of opportunity for you.
Absolutely. It's a global thing. It's you know, yes. And that's what I'm always working towards, expansion. And thanks to the internet, you know, I've been able to connect with people from all around the world on this issue of darkism and how we can solve it. So yes, absolutely. I mean, I would like to see the skin lightening industry, which is $1 billion industry. I want to see the industry gotten rid of completely, because it's predicated on self-hate, darkism, racism. It's predicated on those things. So I would like to see it just completely gotten rid of personally.
Well, you see more and more people talking about melanin and loving melanin. And just like you had at one point in time, everyone wearing a lot of perms. You know, perms lost a lot of business because of the natural hair movement, and which is great. So if we promote loving melanin and want to get all the melanin you can, then maybe that can go away too, because that comes from self-hate. And we got to promote, you know, that to love ourselves, whether we dark, light, in between. We got to love ourselves and not hate each other. Because in this system of white supremacy, whether you're dark, light, in between, they want to put us at the bottom and they want the white folks at the top. That's just bottom line. And then, of course, you break that down to colorism, then I get that point of it too. But even if you're light skinned, you still are into them just as much as you are dark. And look at Barack Obama. He wasn't dark at all. And look all the names that he was called. And he had a white mother. So, you know, and look how they talked about Michelle, and I mean, these people are horrible, these white supremacists. So we have a lot of issues to deal with, Rashida. But, you know, with that said, you know, Rashida, can you let everyone know any upcoming events you may be having before we wrap up?
Absolutely. I'm on tour. It's called the Dark Skin Activist Tour, and it's featuring a dark skinned woman's revenge, which is a play that I wrote in 2006. That's actually the sequel to a play I wrote called A Dark-Skinned Girl's Triumph, the Rashida Strober story. So I'm on tour with the Dark Skin Activist Tour, and it also consists of a book signing. I'm the author of 4 books: Darkism, 25 Ways Dark-Skinned People Are Discriminated Against, How to Be the Hottest Dark-Skinned Chick on the Planet, and also A Dark-Skinned Woman's Revenge is the book version of the play. So, you know, people can come out to that in Tucson, Arizona. That's the first stop for 2017. That's going to be March 18th in Tucson, Arizona. So you can go to my website, rashidastrober.com, aka the darkskinactivist.com, and all the information is there in regards to, you know, if you're in that area, you come out and see the show. It's a phenomenal, phenomenal, phenomenal show. So it opens up the dialogue about darkism, and I'm really excited about it.
All right, well, everyone, make sure we put it up one more time so we can read it off. It'll be at, she said, Tucson, Arizona, at the Hyatt Place Airport. You see the address. Make sure you get some tickets. Support Rashida in her show. And if you have any questions for her, email her or see her on her website. And Rashida, I would say definitely keep speaking up for, you know, those who are dark skinned, you know, in America. We do need that. We need all kind of conversation. OK, and I think it's good to do that, especially a lot of young girls or even, you know, young boys. Keep doing that. I mean, it's definitely a good message to teach them to love themselves. So as dark skinned people, we do deal with a lot of self-hate. I used to hate my dark skin at one point in time. I love the mess out of it now. So, you know, it definitely helps to fight for us to love ourselves.
Absolutely. Thank you. Thank you for having me. I appreciate that. Thank you.